Your answer is the first number that pops into your head. How many James Bond films are there? If you instinctively said 25, and why wouldn't you? No Time to Die, the last Bond film to be released, clearly marketed itself as the 25th installment of the series. Go to the Wikipedia page, and 25th is there in black and white, role referring to the next Bond film as being Bond 26. There are 25 James Bond films, of course there are.
But you are so wrong!
Well, no, there's actually 27, because there is, of course, Casino Royale 1967 and Never Say Never Again, films that seemingly exist solely to create quarrels at pub quizzes up and down the land.
You should have studied the plot more carefully.
Is it really the fault of me to instinctively think that Sean Connery only made 6 Bond films when even box sets dedicated to the actor's role as 007 only contain 6 films? Must I acknowledge that there have already been 7 actors to portray Ian Fleming's 007 on the silver screen because David Niven made that one spoof movie back in the 1960s? Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. Casino Royale 1967 and Never Say Never Again are Bond films that kind of exist by sheer quirk of fate. Their production histories are a complicated web of rights and permissions. Back when I was a kid getting into Bond, these 2 films are often referred to as being unofficial entries in the series, but that moniker is not quite correct.
Oh, really?
I'm sure that to the likes of, the Broccoli family, of course they're unofficial, and each and every copy of both should be burned in a gigantic bonfire. But in reality, they are legitimate films made by people who did own the rights to make them. This isn't like how the 1922 Nosferatu is an unofficial, or perhaps more accurately, an unauthorized Dracula adaptation. Relentless, blood-sucking, and opportunistic, Kevin McClory produced Never Say Never Again with the rights he had to Ian Fleming's original Thunderball story. And the Casino Royale spoof was made after Fleming initially sold the rights to that particular story long before he'd entered into a deal with producers Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman of Eon Productions, who would kick off the Bond film series with Dr. No. Initially being produced as competition to the main films through a series of corporate buyouts and rights exchanges and such, all the Eon-produced Bond films, as well as the spoof Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again, are all under the Amazon MGM umbrella now, so if rights are no longer an issue, why is it that when they announce a 4K Sean Connery Bond collection box set Never Say Never Again is still not included? Even though the films are all part of one big happy corporate family now, there has been some reluctance over the last few years to really embrace these films as a part of the canon. And for those of us who aren't obsessed with Bond to an unhealthy level, as if such people even exist, the existence of these 2 films must be kinda confusing. There was famously that court case a few years ago where someone filed a lawsuit against MGM for boasting that the Bond 50 Blu-ray box set contained all the Bond films to that point, when of course the Niven Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again were missing. I can appreciate how consumers might understand that the David Niven film is clearly outside of the canon. I mean, it's so clearly a spoof and more of an overt comedy than any other Bond film. Well, maybe second to A View to a Kill. But also, I think that the 1967 film has more of a curio status to it than anything. I don't feel like it's a film as much in the public consciousness as, say, Never Say Never Again is. If you're someone who doesn't really keep up to date on film rights and licenses and what have you, if you're new to the Bond films and you're just scrolling through the list of them on Amazon Prime and you happen upon a thumbnail of Sean Connery in a tuxedo and you read in the description that it's Sean Connery's final appearance as James Bond, who are you to question whether the presence of a backgammon-laden Cubby Broccoli on the set negates the film's authenticity? So why not just make the whole thing easier for everyone and start including those films in the conversation?
It seems I underestimated you.
From my own perspective, I do have to admit that from time to time, Never Say Never Again and Casino Royale do slip my mind. If I'm asked to say, like, how many Bond films are there, my mind would always go to 25 immediately. I would describe Daniel Craig as being the 6th actor to play Bond on film, even though technically there is David Niven in there, which would make Daniel Craig the 7th. And it's probably easier for me to do that because I don't like those films all that much. When I was becoming a Bond fan when I was a kid, like I say, they were often referred to as unofficial entries, and they were often afterthoughts, frankly, when it came to books and articles and what have you. And I suppose that line of thinking probably did rub off on me. That's if the films are even mentioned at all. I mean, one of my Bond book bibles from childhood was The Essential Bond, a book that featured detailed write-ups and analyses of all of the Eon Bond films, and the other 2 movies got brief mentions in a short segment at the very end under a chapter heading The Other James Bonds. A part of this, I'm sure, was to satiate Eon to some degree, who clearly didn't want their films mingling with ones outside the family. And yeah, if you have enough of a say, you can demand these things in the movie industry, much like how Steven Spielberg apparently refuses to let his original Jaws be in a box set with the sequel films, lest it lower the sense of prestige and quality of his own film by association. Particularly with how much stress the likes of Never Say Never Again caused Cubby Broccoli and the Eon group back in the day, I'm not surprised that the family would hold some historical ill will against the film and thus not wish to acknowledge it in the same way as they do their own collection of films. But with the Amazon buyout, it's a new era of Bond, and perhaps one where the line between the Eon-produced Bond films and the others is likely to be zapped away with the precision of a Goldfinger laser beam, especially as presumably all Bond films from this point on will indeed be non-Eon productions.
It's going to be your ass, James. Thank you.
Is it time to embrace these freaky cousins as part of the family finally? Casino Royale is probably a bigger ask. Like I say, the film is its own special case, and I don't think anyone coming to the Bond series cold would mistake it as being a proper Bond film, let's say. Never Say Never Again, on the other hand, sure, I mean, it doesn't have the Bond theme, it doesn't have the gun barrel, a bunch of those James Bond movie tropes, but to a casual observer dropping into the film for the first time, perhaps you would just think, oh, okay, it's another Connery Bond film, and not question the status of its authenticity.
I certainly hope so too.
The film has its fans too. I might not be one of them, but I do know a good bunch of people who get an awful lot out of Never Say Never Again, so yeah, why not just loop it into the fold with the others? It's a Sean Connery James Bond performance, which is a precious thing, and while I would rather see the From Russia With Love video game remastered and included in any box set of Connery's Bond performances, a better case could probably be made for Never Say Never Again's inclusion instead. The prompt for me making this video was the Amazon buyout. Up until now, it's been easy to categorize Casino Royale 1967 and Never Say Never Again as being outside of the rest of the film series because they're non-Eon Bonds, and that classification is about to get a lot more complicated, as presumably more non-Eon Bond films are going to be produced as part of the main series. So where does that leave these freaky misfit Bond adventures of rights holders past? Do you think it's time the once blurred lines between Bond film official status be done away with, or are you quite happy for them to forever remain outliers? Do let me know in the comments section below. I am curious to see if there is a consensus on this. I think if it were just Never Say Never Again, I think we'd all probably be fine with it. Like, okay, fine, it can come in, it can stay, but Casino Royale's the one still that you're probably more than likely to close the door on and not let in the house. Also, below there are links to my various social media pages, as well as the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button, so do click those to stay up to date on future video uploads, and with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.